We have baskets from various portions of the United States, but the most famous of these baskets do come to us from California, and we generally say these are the best in the country. And I've written down on my slide, stunning basket makers. These folks were also hunter-gatherers, and we do assume that the baskets were particularly important in this region because they were used in gathering, collecting, and preserving food. Among the folks who produce really spectacular baskets. The most famous yet would be the Pomo. These folks have got a couple maps that mark their location. They are today located north of San Francisco in a region that is fairly mountainous. And these folks truly create amazing baskets. And when it comes to the work created by women, we do believe that this is truly an outlet for creativity and personal expression, which we'll see in a moment. Baskets were really an important part of life. So the men also made baskets, but the baskets that they crafted were for purposes of catching fish and also for catching birds. So they're basically traps that the men are making. The women are creating the baskets that are used to harvest seeds, to collect the seeds. They're also carrying things, seeds and other materials in their burden baskets. They're storing things, roots, for example, in baskets to overwinter. And they are crafting watertight baskets that can hold liquids. These can be used for bathing babies, but they can also be used for cooking food. What happens is the fibers that are a part of the construction of the basket will actually expand when they become wet and the basket itself becomes watertight. If you want to cook with your basket, you can insert heated rocks, which will bring the temperature of the water inside the basket up, appropriate for cooking. In addition to this, we carry our babies in baskets, and we also give baskets as gifts. Baskets also are given as markers of passages in life, and we'll see one of those in a moment. And we give them for special occasions as gifts to friends and family members. And they can even be dangled from a cradle of a baby to amuse the child. And once you've seen these, you'll understand why they would be so successful in doing that. So let's take a look. By the 19th century, particularly towards the end of the century, the baskets that were being made in California had become famous across the United States and were avidly collected as part of what we might call the tourist trade. This is probably one of those baskets, and it is located in the University Museum at Penn, so you actually have a chance to see it. It is figure 430 in our book, and what this also means is we have the name of the basket maker, because by this point in time, the weavers of baskets among the Pomo had become fairly well recognized, and the lady who actually crafted this basket is named Mary Posh. We also, in fact, have a record that explains the materials that went into this and how long it took her to create it. This particular basket used plus or minus approximately 500 feathers from woodpecker and quail plus 300 shell beads to create this, which took 11 months to finish. Part of the charm and part of the labor-intensive production of these baskets includes the insertion of bird feathers into the weaving process itself. In addition to that, you often have little pieces of shell or bead that dangle from these baskets, moving, reflecting light, and sometimes even making sounds, all crafted by a single individual and requiring an enormous amount of time to do this. This particular basket was made for the tourist trade, and we have all the information we do about it coming directly from the collector, the person who acquired this particular basket. It is of a type, however, that traditionally would have been given to a woman after she'd delivered a baby, after she'd given birth to a child. She would then take that basket and give it to her mother-in-law. So the basket would be a part of a cultural gift exchange, which would be linking family members tightly together. That baby would receive its first bath in another basket, a basket that was designed to be watertight. And that basket would be kept by that individual child throughout its lifetime, kind of marking a passage as it matured into adulthood. These baskets then are important as gifts. They also are created to mark particular passageways in our life as we move from child to adult. At the end of our lives, the baskets will often be placed with us as we are cremated, and the baskets themselves also will be burned. So they really do many times follow us through our lives. This is another example of a Pomo basket, and again we have the name of the person who made it, Jenny Hughes. This particular basket was made late 19th century, and it marks a young girl's coming to adulthood, and it's sometimes referred to as a dowry basket. It would be a basket given after the first menstruation when the young lady went into a period of isolation. So it's part of a coming of age ceremony, basically. It is located in the Brooklyn Museum today, where you can take a look at it. If you're interested in Pomo baskets, I would also recommend Penn because they were given a very large donation of Pomo baskets, so they have a number of them that are available for viewing. The remarkable thing here is the quail feathers that we're looking at extending from the surface of the basket. Well, woodpecker feathers, and I'm talking about the head feathers, which are red, are the most highly valued. There are other feathers that are used, the glistening feathers from mallard ducks, for example, or in this case, the top knots that come from quail, which we'll see in just a moment. This is worked into the weaving. The crafter used willow stems to make the frame, and I guess you could think of the warp portion of the creation within the weaving, going up and down, and then sedge roots, which would be woven into that to actually create the walls. There is a geometric step pattern that decorates the surface of this in a very rhythmic way, and it is repeated around the vessel. So we get the sense of a rotational movement around this vessel, but the decoration on the surface, also the feathers, make the vessel very three-dimensional as it seems to extend into space. Those little white pieces on the surface are disc-shaped beads. They've been cut, they've been polished from sea snails, from shells basically. This part of the operation is done by the men. So to some extent there's an overlap of activities, male, female, but the two genders come together to help to create a magnificent end product in this particular vessel. Here are two more examples of the amazing workmanship of Pomo basket makers. We do have accounts, at least a couple, from early Spanish explorers, and one of them, 1579, comes from a crewman on a service for Sir Francis Drake's expedition on the California coast, and he particularly notes the Pomo baskets with the red woodpecker feathers. He's astonished by their beautiful color, by the decorative hangings that suspend from them, but he's also amazed by the fact that they are watertight. So we know that this tradition was alive and well in the 16th century before contact. We also believe that it was alive and well much, much earlier. We have another account by the first Spanish exploration, which sailed the California coast, and that occurred in 1542. And in that particular encounter, the Spanish viewed the people, interacted with the people, determined that they were hunter-gatherers, looked at their civilization and compared it to what they knew about Mesoamerica, and decided that these folks didn't have monumental architecture. They didn't have a very strong social hierarchy. In other words, no significant elite at the top, and that they didn't have a well-trained standing army. And what they determined from looking around and visualizing everything was, hey, These folks are simply not worth looting. They thought that the folks were too unsophisticated to bother with. And at the end of the day, what that meant was the people of California had another 200 years to go before the Spanish friars arrive, before the soldiers get there, and before they're assimilated essentially into a Spanish colony. Since you all know I'm a bird person, this is my chance to include some bird photos. I do want you to see the quail feathers that decorate the sides of many of these baskets, and they are the crest feathers on top of this is the male quail, a male quail over here. The lady also has one. So the bird is particularly valued for those plumes on the top of its head, and as you can imagine, it would require a number of quail to fulfill the obligation of covering a basket. This is an example of a red or red-orangish Pomo hanging basket. This particular one is located in the Natural History Museum in New York City, which houses a number of Native American artifacts and art objects which you can take a look at. I also have a picture for you of a woodpecker, and the feathers that are so highly prized, of course, are on the top of the head. That's where the red feathers would be located, and they are, in a sense, trophy pieces for basket making materials. This particular basket is an interesting one. It helps us to know that the baskets also might reflect on myths and traditions and histories, so they might be more than just gifts or items that indicate a passage in your life. This particular one is a replica of a spirit basket that was used by a cultural hero to steal the sun. That particular myth, different cultural hero, is shared along the, I'm going to say, the northwest coast region and the south coast, southwest region of the United States. In this particular case for the Pomo, the sun is carried home in, you guessed it, a basket. So when you take a look at this, the abalone, an abalone shell is highly reflective. You can find some of it hanging right here, another one hanging over here. Those discs reference the sun. There are also crescent shapes on this that reference the moon. Arrow shapes, I think you can also find those hanging down, and those reference the stars. If you take a look at our fishy, and he's located right here underneath this on the bottom, you guessed it again, this is a reference to the underworld, and the basket bowl itself is a reference to the earth. So designs like this tend to be cosmic, and they also have the ability to retell stories of the mythic past, and in this case of a particularly important cultural hero who helps human beings by giving us light for the first time. Designs like this might come to the crafter, the creator, the designer, the artist through visions. What happens with these designs is that they become personal property and essentially are copyrighted. They belong to the individual. They can't be used by anybody else because they've been gifted to the artist through a vision, and they maintain a kind of spiritual quality and certainly are very, very personal by nature. Basket making does continue today in both traditional forms and also in much more assertive modern contemporary art forms. But there are issues with continuing the traditions. Among them is gaining access to the materials that are needed to make baskets. Traditionally, women would go collect them. Today, this is not always possible because the materials are on private lands that were once upon a time public. Sometimes the materials have been treated with heavy doses of pesticides, making them undesirable or unusable. In addition to that, we've simply lost a lot of plant species because many developers, Westerners, think, well, they're weeds after all. And we're also losing an increasing amount of vegetation to fires. Please take a look at the video I've included, and it depicts some of the challenges that modern weavers approach and overcome today to continue the tradition of basket making.